Howdy, it's Tublacain, and before we start today's video, a reminder here that you need to go to the LFE website, and that stands for Learning from Experience, and at this web address or URL you will find previews and information about my complete series entitled How to Run an Atlas Craftsman Lathe, and you can purchase or view just one volume or all 4 volumes, and that is a total of 40 chapters, everything you needed to know about how to run your Atlas Craftsman lathe. Howdy, it's Tublacain again, and welcome to my machine shop video tips. This particular video is entitled Philosophy, and it's based on the Nicholson book that was printed by the millions over the years, and I think it's out of print now, and it was called Philosophy or Philosophy. I'm not sure how they pronounce it, but today we're going to discuss the uses and care of the common machinist file. I own hundreds and hundreds of files, and a file is one of the most common and useful of all hand tools that you'll find in a metalworking shop, or woodworking shop for that matter. Now let me make something very clear here, that among my hundreds of files, I know that I just have them piled together and they're touching one another, and this isn't really proper. They should be held and separated from one another. But when I buy these files, they are used and they're already in a drawer or in a box touching one another, and they have been doing so for many years, and I do not have the wall space to separate them and hang them properly, so this is not something I am worried about, but it is not correct. This is one of my file racks, but you can see it only holds about 14 or 16 files, and I would need an entire room to hang all my files up, or drawers with dividers in them, so I got them piled together just the way I bought them. Files are made of a very high quality tool steel, and they have been heat treated, and here are the main parts of a file: the tang, the heel, the face, the point, and the edge. Now the tang is usually softened, that is annealed, and to allow the handle to be screwed onto it. The rest of it is very hard and brittle. Never use a file to pry, you definitely will break it. Files are one of the most ancient tools. They've been around for eons, and they're even mentioned in the Old Testament. In 1 Samuel's 13:21, they refer to files and the sharpening of axes and mattocks. So it is a tool that has been around for thousands of years, and it's still very useful. If you do not like to use a file or avoid files, it might be because you haven't used sharp files, because a sharp file or a new file is a wonderful tool. The length of a file is measured from the heel to the point, such as a 10-inch or a 12-inch file. And files are available in literally dozens of cross-sectional shapes, and here's just a few of them that you might commonly see: a flat, pillar, square, round, which is sometimes called a rat tail, a half round, triangular or 3-point. This is called a barrette, diamond, and a knife, an oval, and many, many others. This is a picture out of a Nicholson book, and the teeth on a file can be categorized really into just 4 different types. The single cut, where all of the lines are going in one direction; the double cut, where you have the lines going first in one and then in the other to form individual teeth, so that's a double cut; the rasp. Now a rasp is most commonly used for wood or other very soft materials; and a curved tooth, where the teeth are individually milled, and this is good for soft materials such as lead, babbitt, and so on. On this Nicholson mill bastard file, again, this is single cut, so you, you can see that the lines all go one way, as compared to a double cut, where the lines go two different ways and form the individual teeth. And you can see how much more aggressive this is and how much more quickly it would remove the material. So the double cut is for roughing work and rapid removal of stock, and the single cut is for finer work, finishing work, draw filing, and so on. Here's another view of a rasp. As a matter of fact, this is used for horseshoeing by a farrier, and you can see that we have individual teeth here and would very rapidly cut or remove soft material such as a hoof. You wouldn't use this on steel. The coarseness of a file is described in three ways. The bastard file is the very coarsest of the three. Then comes the second cut, you can see that's a little bit finer, and finally the smooth. And these are single cut files. Again, bastard, second cut, not to be confused with single cut, and smooth. Similarly, in a double cut file, bastard being the coarsest, second cut medium, and smooth is the finest. Again, that's in a double cut: bastard, coarse, second cut, and smooth. Furthermore, as far as the coarseness of a file is concerned, when you have a long file such as a 12-inch, the mill bastard is going to appear very coarse, but as the file is reduced in length down to even a 4-inch, a mill file is much finer. A bastard mill file is much finer. Now when you go to a big box store to choose a file, they've done the choosing for you, and you're going to find a very limited selection of files there hanging from a card. And they're not cheap. A good file is going to be $8, $9, $10. But the selection will not be very great. If you want a better selection, you're going to need to go to an industrial supplier, and the things you have to consider is the length, the coarseness, and the shape. Most often you're going to find that files are tapered, such as this one. It's wider right here than what it is here, but you're also going to run into files that are straight. And we got equal width here and here. Sometimes this is called a hand file, and there's a lot of different names for files, and some of them are confusing and misleading. A pillar file is one of my favorites, and here's a couple examples, a 10-inch and an 8-inch. And a pillar file has one what they call safe edge. That means there's no teeth on it, where there are teeth on the other side. And the same is true with this one. Notice that this file is tapered from the point to the heel. This is a double cut. Very handy for slots and holes, because you can run the safe edge up against the side and it isn't going to cut that side. Here's another little file with safe edges, but they are rounded or radiused. Here's a selection of square files in various sizes, from large to small. This is a 12-inch and working on down to 6-inch. Notice that they are tapered. They come much smaller than this also in the way of needle files, which I will talk about, or Swiss files, and I will talk about them later. Here's a selection of round files, or rat tails, and I think you know where they got the name. And notice how much coarser, again, this 14-inch file is than the 8-inch file, even though they're all bastard files. These files are tapered, but when you get into the untapered type of round file, those are usually made for chainsaws and such, but it's handy to use a chainsaw file when you don't want a tapered file. And these are going to be a little bit finer. Here is a small selection of three-corner files or triangular files, anywhere from a 12-inch down to a 6-inch. These were very commonly used years ago to sharpen saws, and they could be used in saw filing machines, something that isn't done very much anymore. Three-corner files. Very good for making square holes out of a round hole. These are knife edge files. They're thicker on one side and almost down to a knife edge on this side, and that's a safe edge as well. And they are tapered, and you might see them tapered. Well, this one's been broke off, and it shows you how brittle they are. There's rust on some of these used files, so make sure you store your files where they are dry. The rust very rapidly destroys them. That's a file that should be thrown away. Let's take a look at some special use files. Here's a handy file. I think it's even called a handy file for a toolbox or glove compartment, where it's got a rasp and a regular file, and it doesn't use a handle, and it's just you could even put it in your pocket for sharpening a sickle or something when you're out in the field or out in the yard. These are thread restoring files, and I've shown these in one of my other videos, and each one of these is a different pitch. For instance, here's a 13 and a 14 threads per inch, 18 and 16, and so on. And here's another thread type file. Now, why this would be any advantage over a three-corner file, I don't know. I suppose it was just something to sell. Here's a little ignition file. Well, we don't have points anymore, but I still use these in my antique tractors and magnetos. I'm not sure what kind of file this is, or what I know what it is, I don't know what it's called. Often used by gunsmiths, and they come in different varieties, also for inletting stocks and such. You'll find these in the Brownell catalog. These are riffler files. Very small, something like jeweler's files. Very handy for die work. They allow you to work above your work because they're at an angle. Many different shapes, and they're available in rasps as well, and these were used by a sculptor, and there's still wood and plaster in these, just the way I bought them. Double-ended. These are pretty expensive. Here's a file you would never use anymore, and that's used to sharpen auger bits. And most people don't even know what an auger bit is anymore. So many of the files and the shapes are no longer available because there is no market for them. These are needle files, and they usually come in a little pouch to protect them, sometimes called Swiss files. I call them needle files. Here's an older set of Nicholson files, and they have the handle built right into them. You don't use a wooden handle, you just use this end as a bit of a knurl on some of them. And they come in about every shape that you can think of. I have quite a few of these. They're very useful for fine model work, jewelry, die work, and so on. Here are some of the different shapes and names for the shapes or the files. Needle files, jeweler's files, Swiss files. It all means the same. The coarseness of needle files is by number. double-aught being the coarsest, and then working its way finer all the way to number 6, which is quite fine. You should always use a handle on a file, and the handles must be purchased separately, and they fit onto the tang. And they come in various sizes proportional with the size of the file that you're going to be using, and generally they consider that the handle will last a lot longer than a file, so you can move them to your new files as the old files wear out and are discarded. The cheaper file handles are simply wood, and you drive them on. I do not like them because when you hang up a file, often this slides off and the files drop on the floor. I prefer this type, which is called, some of the brand names are Screws On. I believe that says Screws On, and it literally forms a bit of a thread on the soft tang as you screw it on. And there's another brand that is called, well, that's also a Screws On, so those are nice handles. There's another one that you just drive on. Some of these are clamp-on type, adjustable. You can back this off, and it's just like a clamp or a little vise. Here's an older type of file handle, cast iron, that a man sent me, and I thank you for that. And I never did send a letter. I don't think I have your email address. But that's the way they made file handles years ago. Fits the handle very nicely, or the hand very nicely, and you clamp the file on with a thumb screw. Make sure you use a file handle when you're filing on the lathe. Here's a beautiful little file handle. Actually, it's a chisel handle, or it's for gravers. My brother Jan from Cody, Wyoming sent me this, but it's just perfect for holding these smaller files in the 4 and 6 inch range. I don't mean needle files, but the ones with a regular tang. And you can tap them in there, and you can file all day long without getting a blister. And they fit right in the palm of your hand, and that's what gravers used, which are men that made engravings on guns and whatnot. And okay, so get yourself some of those too, and they won't roll off the table. That's the beauty of those. Here's some other suggestions from my brother in Cody, Wyoming, to make file handles that are of this type, only slightly larger, and he's using Pvc End Caps. Now, all those trademarks there would have to be filed off, or you would end up with a blister. But here's different kinds of pipe caps and so on, and there's wood glued in there. It would be a large dowel, and then a hole drilled in there, and then the file just pushed in, and that gives you this kind of filing action using the heel of your hand. So those are some suggestions. Some files that are purchased at the box stores are going to have handles on them, plastic handles, and such as this, so the handle does not come off. Here's another one. That's a Nicholson, and for a while they were making files like this. I rather like that, but if you were filing for a long time, it probably would hurt the palm of your hand. And here's a plastic one on a chainsaw file, and that's broken off. That's one that I will throw away. And some people make their own file handles. There's one made just out of a piece of square wood, or you can make them out of dowels. For best results, it's absolutely necessary that you keep your file clean, and there's all kinds of file cleaners or file cards. And here's a Nicholson with a brush on one side and then the wire card on the other side. And then they also made them like this, just with the file card on one side. There's one with my name on it. I've had it since I was in high school. And here's a little bit cheaper one. This one says Bell System, which was Ma Bell originally. They had everything marked. But here's my favorite kind, this Colton, and I have a whole bunch of these. Cleans all kinds of files, and I particularly like this little rod that is used for removing pins from the file, which I will talk about momentarily. When you clean a file, never clean them on a wire brush, electric wire brush. But use your file card not like this, but with the teeth. And both sides, the full length. Take your time and get all of the debris out of there. Sometimes your file will become loaded with pieces of soft material such as aluminum, and those we call pins, P-I-N-S. And if the file brush does not remove them, use this little rod here, and you literally have to clean every tooth, but that will pick them out of there. You can see them coming out. And another excellent method is to take a piece of copper or brass, and you can see how there are little teeth in there, and this is a soft material, and you can run it like this, back and forth, and you can see how clean that is making the file. Now another tip, if your file has been consistently loading on you with soft material, take some chalk and chalk your file, just regular school chalk. That in the way forms a bit of a parting and prevents loading or clogging or pinning of the file. Regular old chalk. Do not use oil. Absolutely keep your files oil free.